Destiny sits in a strange place right now, similar to other games that have been around for a long time, like World of Warcraft or Final Fantasy XIV, where, while still technically being the same game, is vastly different to how it was at release. In the years since its launch, Destiny 2 has had so many changes, updates, revisions, and reworks that some people jokingly refer to it as Destiny 2.5 or 2.7, because these differences have changed the gameplay so significantly that, in addition to older content just straight up becoming lost media, that the current state of Destiny 2 is more akin to the original plans for Destiny 3. Destiny 1, however, has not changed, unsurprisingly. It is still very much playable, albeit with a significantly less active player base. So much so that activities like raids and nightfalls need to be planned in advance, as there aren't enough people to just jump on and start at the drop of an hat. Now, mainly out of curiosity, I started playing a little Destiny 1 back in 2022, and I immediately saw the appeal, especially in the context of modern Destiny 2. The art style is more generic, but also more grounded, and the gameplay is a hell of a lot simpler. But in spite of all this, it's still a very fun game to play. As I go through, I like to identify all of the stuff that works in D1 that was built on and expanded on in D2, and look at some of the stuff that was removed and kind of try to understand why. It's very humbling to see the primitive systems whose more advanced and refined counterparts we take for granted today in action. The old director, inaccessible outside of orbit. Only one single landing zone for each map. No subclass abilities, no mantling. As I said before, it's simpler, it's slower, but just as engaging, albeit in a different way. It's difficult to avoid comparisons to Halo, especially Halo Reach, but you can clearly see some of the same DNA shared between games. The same semi-clunky movement, weapons handle the same, the animation style is the same. Hell, the first mission where you encounter the Hive is basically identical to this section of the first mission in Halo Reach, music and all. I think this was the key to bridging the gap between longtime Halo fans and this weird new science fantasy game by the same guys. What I get from Destiny 1 is this weird feeling of secondhand nostalgia. I have friends who I play Destiny 2 with who played Destiny 1 back in its heyday. On the odd occasions that I can drag them back onto their PlayStations, or at the very least get them to watch me stream it, there's this fun dichotomy of one of us exploring something new for the first time, and the other essentially reliving ancient memories, like showing your favourite movie to someone who hasn't seen it before. If you haven't done anything like it yet, I'd recommend, because Destiny 1 absolutely has that nostalgic and pseudo-nostalgic, para-nostalgic vibe. I load into Venus or Mars, and the patrol zones are full of enemies to fight, missions to complete, public events to do, but no players. And when you do encounter someone, it's a little bit like Journey. The likelihood of encountering another human being in what is essentially a dead game just fills you with this unique spark of joy. Otherwise, these places are, and I hate using this word, liminal. Like, thousands of players wandered here, played missions, danced with friends, completed quests, and now it's empty. An empty, hollow world filled with memories, dust, and echoes. All for me to explore, all alone. Kind of like what your Guardian is actually doing in-game. There's also a vastly different vibe, emotional tone that is, to how the world, story, and missions are presented to you.
I don't even have time to explain why I don't have time to explain.
Up until a few years ago in Destiny 2, if you'd imported your D1 character, you'd occasionally get some unique dialogue lines referencing events that your Guardian canonically did, like killing Oryx or stopping Siva. This was a nice touch for dedicated players, but has since been discontinued in favour of generic dialogue, which merely references the events, not your Guardian actually completing them. Now, from a development perspective, this makes sense, as it cuts down on dialogue needing to be recorded and brings new players up to speed on past major events without the narrative dissonance of their character having done things which the player hasn't done, and also helps to break down the barrier between the Guardian and the player a little more. This is the major difference in story presentation. It's difficult to describe, but modern Destiny storytelling is having the events in the game presented to you, the player, almost directly. Whereas classic Destiny storytelling is having the events in the game happen to your Guardian, with the player experiencing the story from their perspective. Now, this is done in a number of ways, but the main one that I've noticed is that mission dialogue is rarely, if ever, directed toward the player or the Guardian anymore. It's mostly just two or more characters talking to one another and exchanging expository dialogue. And when the player is directly spoken to, it is almost always just to instruct them as what they need to be doing next. Classic Destiny storytelling will have the characters address the Guardian directly, with Ghost acting as a surrogate voice when a response is needed.
It has the arc source you need. Find it.
Won't be easy. The Freehold tummies are still crawling with Vex.
But more importantly, Ghost and Guardian are treated as two separate characters. A team, a dynamic duo. Ghost is the brains and the Guardian is the brawn, with the Ghost talking to you and having little chats to remind you and you that you're not alone down here.
Not to unsettle you, but I'm tracking the sword by the light of the Guardians it's killed.
As such, the conversations feel more direct, more personal, invoking the vibe of a more personal journey for the Guardian, rather than just someone completing objectives. I get that Nolan North is a busy man, I know he can't be on standby to voice Ghost every season, but it is a little disheartening to not have someone to talk to that often, especially when you do these activities solo. This is mostly rectified with the expansion story missions, where a lot of the main cast is all together and the ensemble dynamic is much more fleshed out, but it's still noticeably missing in the majority of D2's seasonal content. To really hammer home this point, the mission Akvostov Rising from the Rise of Iron campaign in Destiny 1 and it has you looking through the Cosmodrome for a weapon part for the exotic Vostov rifle. Yes, that was an exotic. No, it wasn't good. Toward the end of the mission, Ghost wants to take a look at the view from a catch, and the objective displayed is literally, enjoy the view with Ghost. You get a short but sweet little chat with him where he thanks you for being his guardian and for being a friend, and it feels like a personal message from Bungie, like at the end of Halo Reach, and it really is just a heartwarming touch. While not completely gone from Destiny 2, again, it's noticeably absent from the game at large. Now, all this is more referring to the Taken King and Rise of Iron expansions, as the vanilla campaign, The Dark Below and House of Wolves, are not particularly great stories. They tend to suffer from the same issues as later D2 seasons, where it's just a bunch of stuff happening with no particular theme or cohesion, really. I mean, The Dark Below literally has 3 story missions and a pretty mediocre raid. However, there is still a tangible draw to the world of Destiny 1 that differs from its younger counterpart. Each section of the campaign has your Guardian go to a new place. The Cosmodrome, Venus, the Moon, and Mars, and each place you learn about a new type of enemy and have several small engagements with them, which supports you in exploring these new locations diegetically. Following along with the story, few Guardians actually patrol the Cosmodrome, and it's left largely unmapped, a time capsule of the Golden Age. Same with Venus, few, if any, had actually been to the Ishtar Academy or approached the Vault of Glass before you did. The Moon has been off-limits for years since the Great Disaster, and the Cabal have enacted an exclusion zone around Mars. Not only are you, the player, exploring these places like new, but your Guardian is too. There's an unmatched, tangible sense of discovery that's just absent from Destiny 2, because many of the locations have either already been conquered, either by the Vanguard or other races, or are so rife with players that there doesn't seem much to discover anymore. No matter what, you will never be the first one there anymore. Even newer locations like Europa or Savathun's Throne World seem to lack this intrepid sense of discovery. It's the liminal feeling that drives this tone in a way that Destiny 2 just can't. There's also a few other things which give D1 its unique vibe. One thing I noticed is the color palette, which is kind of hard to describe. It's not washed out, so to say, but it is limited. However, the contrast comes from strong colors against the weaker ones. It works really well here in the Cosmodrome, where, the bite from the first snows of early winter diegetically washes out the color tone, but the strong impact colors of the sunset cut through and reflect off of things like the rusted cars, giving that contrast. Or here on Venus, where the unnatural blue and grey crag is being reclaimed by the lush green, and then it's all just blasted with vibrant yellow light. it still looks incredible. You know what? While we're on the subject, Destiny, as a series, just has the best skyboxes I've ever seen, bar none. Just fucking look at these. But as you can see, Destiny 2's colour palette is, for want of a better term, safer. There's more vibrancy but less subtlety, which is largely due to the renewed lighting system introduced in Beyond Light. No doubt it looks amazing and absolutely better than D1, but there's an almost primitive charm to the way things look here. Like, Bungie was pulling off every trick in the book to get things looking as good as they did on the old Halo Reach engine. To add to this, a lot of the areas of the game seem less polished, but not in an unfinished kind of way, more an endearing way. Like, there was so much more that Bungie wanted to add but had to cut for time, which, we know to be true. This is especially noticeable in the vanilla areas, like all these caves in the Cosmodrome that just lead nowhere, or the fact that you can jump out onto these platforms inside the wall, again, leading into that sense of discovery, even if it doesn't go anywhere. Maybe we like to imagine that they could have put something in there if they had the time, an Easter egg or an exotic quest. But I especially like this quest in House of Wolves that puts you in the grottos, exactly where you scan the Warsat in the Fallen Saber Strike, which, most players will have done in Destiny 2. And this tunnel just links right back to the refinery from the Devil's Lair strike. It's like, what? These were connected the whole time? There's little stuff like that you miss as a D2 player that's just so novel and charming. Did I mention the vibes? I didn't mention the vibes. I'll stop saying vibes. Destiny 1's atmosphere is unmatched, even by Destiny 2. The skyboxes are one thing, but there are other little touches like the environment design and the weather effects. The chilly mist in the Cosmodrome, it actually feels cold out there. It's washed out and grey, but still vibrant and mysterious. Venus is constantly raining and tropical, it feels sweaty and muggy, and the plant life reclaiming the city just belongs there. The Vault of Glass feels more like an ancient cavern system, especially with this breeze carrying centuries-old dust across the Templar's well. The moon is cold, it's desolate and haunted, a place that can not only not support life, but is actively hostile towards it. And the tower feels like a tower. It's high up, so it's cold, with incoming ships blowing mist across the courtyard while the sun glares through the clouds like a perpetual 6:15 a.m. And Mars... I love Mars! Now this is going to sound strange, but a lot of the atmosphere can be attributed to the fact that the game is on console. Now, a lot of people nowadays will play Destiny and just video games in general at a higher FOV, a high resolution, and usually with a mouse and keyboard. The console container limits your options for movement, frame rate, and graphical fidelity, so pretty much everyone is forced to experience it in the same way, which contributes to this identity of universal nostalgia that most Destiny 1 players seem to conform to. Just a side note, I love that on the PS4 the controller LED changes based on what's happening in-game. When your super is ready, it glows yellow. When you go into dark areas, it glows a bright white when Ghost activates the flashlight. Really cute, novel stuff, and it just adds to the charm. And the fact that Destiny was a console exclusive also played a part in its pacing. You're a lot less nimble on a controller, so the gameplay is a lot grosser, requiring less finesse. If you're doing things slower, then the gameplay has to be slower, which is where the primitive contrast between Destiny 1 and modern Destiny 2 clashes hard. I know D2 was a console exclusive at launch, but a vast number of gameplay changes and updates since seem to have been made with PC controls in the front seat. I'm not saying that it's no longer possible to play D2 with a controller, but it does seem to be a driving force behind its far more dynamic gameplay. In addition to this, a minor change that seems strikingly different at first is the UI. The HUD is 2 colors only, with no dynamic system to indicate the selected subclass, and without class abilities it seems kind of small and basic compared to Destiny 2. The character system, however, is mostly the same. Destiny 2's only major change aside from the order of certain items is all this gubbins they put over the weapon icon. There's these gold sparklies and red borders and in Masterworks that clog up the picture, but take it all away, still the same old character screen. However, the quest, bounties, and triumphs have all undergone major changes since D2 Vanilla, mostly for the better, and as I mentioned before, some quality of life changes make the game easier to play, like accessing the Director from Patrol. Ironically, D2 Vanilla subclass selection was vastly dumbed down from D1, but with some recent major changes, it's returned to a state kind of similar to D1, although with vastly more complexity in terms of build crafting, i.e. there is now build crafting. No more top tree Night Stalker for this guy. Although it is a gigantic pain in the ass to have to play for 30 odd hours per subclass, per character, just to unlock all this stuff. Although, self-res, I'll never forget you.
The Nexus mine first.
Doesn't change the plan.
Did you know? Vanilla Destiny 1 only had 2 subclasses per class? That's right, kids. Warlocks only had Solar and Void, Hunters only had Arc and Solar, and Titans only had Arc and Void. You had to buy the Taken King expansion if you wanted to be a Stormcaller, Sunbreaker, or Night Stalker. Imagine locking some of the most fun powers and abilities behind a paywall. I am so glad that Bungie does not do that anymore. Well, at least you got a good campaign out of it. Speaking of, do you hear that? I hear that. Is it Taken King time? It's Taken King time.
We have slain his brood. We have murdered his son. And now the Taken King comes for us all.
The Taken King, the first expansion not to be called an expansion. It's its own thing. Now, I was not around for the release of Taken King, but its reverence across the community as the best expansion and the one that saved Destiny as a series is difficult to ignore. And with good reason. It gave a breath of fresh air into the game with a new location, an actually good raid, great story, incredible music, and a bunch of other cool shit that House of Wolves actually did but everyone ignores, like patrol quests and repurposed raid locations as missions. But by far the best thing that Taken King introduced was the dynamic tone that vanilla Destiny 1 desperately needed. Sure, it was mysterious and dangerous, but what else was it? The Dark Below gave us Moons Haunted, House of Wolves gave us nothing, but Taken King was something incredible. First off, it established a firm sense of danger, real actual peril through a pretty kick-ass cutscene. Oryx massacres the Awoken fleet, kills Marasov, and establishes himself as big man on campus. He's here, he's queer, and he's fucking dangerous. Not only that, but we get a pretty big splash of high fantasy in an otherwise very science fiction heavy science fantasy game. Oryx is essentially a modified necromancer, except he takes the living instead of the dead. In addition to this, we give some of our established characters character. Bungie finally put their Firefly obsession to good use and gave Nathan Fillion an actual character to play. Cade's character is a time capsule of 2015 writing, but in a good way. It hasn't been pushed too far over puckish rogue into zany robot man just yet. He, or rather the writers, know exactly when, where, and how far to push before it needs to become serious again.
Eris, get your rock off my map.
In short, it's very good writing that contrasts but doesn't clash with the legitimate danger that we've established, unlike,
All right, partner, this is a Cade riff in 6. Watch me for the changes and try to keep up. Now let's go to prison!
The new patrol location is the Dreadnought, Oryx's big ship. It is a very big ship. So big that the Cabal crashed their big ship into Oryx's big ship, and now their big ship looks like a small ship. This is actually where the patrol landing zone is, and it does a wonderful job of amplifying the danger that the Dreadnought presents, as the Cabal, Hive, and occasionally Taken fight it out endlessly. You slip through the cracks and down gloomy, haunting corridors, only to emerge in massive, open expanses dedicated to God knows what horrific rituals and sermons. There is a genuine, palpable fear when patrolling the Dreadnought, an atmosphere unmatched by any other location in the series except maybe the haunted pyramid ship on the moon. I think that the reason the campaign is so memorable is the use of set-piece locations in several, but not all, missions. Cade's stash has you back in the Cosmodrome, but climbing one of the massive launch towers you've only seen from a distance. The pacing is great, the dialogue is the perfect balance of expository and fun, and the level of detail is phenomenal, like how the whole tower shakes with the wind. And then later you go back into Crota's throne world, except this time you're alone, invisible, and you have to sneak your way through to the Oversoul throne and steal a piece of Crota's soul! And this isn't the only time you'll revisit raid locations this expansion. One mission has the Vex actually let you into the Vault of Glass so you can purge the Taken from it. That's how dangerous they are. When I finally got to Regicide for the first time, I had convinced a D1 veteran friend to replay it with me. And holy shit, the hype he bought made it so much better. The music swells, the dark corridor lights up with Oryx's sigil, the door open, here, just watch. This is it. This is the source. This is the kind of spectacle that Destiny rarely seems to be able to capture anymore, with, of course, some notable exceptions, but back then it was new, it was crazy, and very fucking cool. The fight itself is pretty but this isn't the big kaboom. Oh no, they saved that for the raid. Unfortunately, I don't have any footage of Destiny 1 King's Fall, but I can assure you it hits just as hard in Destiny 2. Nah, they don't make them like they used to. Taken King also added a bunch of cool stuff, like the Sunless Cell Strike and Fallen Saber, which had a variant related to an exotic quest where Rasputin gives you the blueprints to go in and forge Sleeper Simulant for yourself, which is really fun, but also horrifically tedious. It also added Taken variants of older strikes, which allowed Bungie to begin their favourite pastime, reusing content. There are some fun changes in these, but things really get better with Rise of Iron, but we'll get to that. We'll get to that. The downside is, trying to play a lot of this content in 2024 just fucking sucks. A lot of the exotic quests, even the vanilla ones, require multiplayer activities like Crucible and raids, which locks most of these weapons out of the modern player's grasp, unless they're either particularly dedicated or insane. Some of the Taken King quests require you to wait for random events to happen in patrol, and then very quickly attempt to kill 3 Taken mages, and then very quickly kill the champion that appears. Very hard to do solo. It sucks. I had to bribe a friend to get most of it done. Taken King made all the right moves, and you can still see why it's so revered to this day. In spite of a few hiccups, it's probably the reason why Destiny has been cemented as a cultural staple in the way that it is today. It brought definition, tone, and weight to the series, which has now long since been suffering from the resultant success. Taken King also got a pretty kick-ass live-action trailer. I'm not allowed to put it in here because it has copyright music in it, so go and watch it. Pause now and go watch it. You watched it? Hell yeah, dude. Rise of Iron. Rise of Iron was deemed by most to be as good as, if not slightly better than the Taken King. The campaign was much shorter and the story less involved, but the host of additional content it brought more than made up for it. Honestly, I think the reverence for Rise of Iron outweighs that of Taken King. If you ask a lot of long-time Destiny players what their favourite raid is from either game, a lot of them will still say Wrath of the Machine. The single instance of Siva appearing in Destiny 2 has had the community frothing at the mouth, begging for its return ever since. I remember when the name for Season of the Splicer was leaked and the entire online presence went fucking ballistic. And that's because Siva is genuinely one of the coolest things in the Destiny universe. In kind of reverse of how Taken King brought a fantasy element to the party, Rise of Iron brings it back down to pure science fiction, but with a medieval fantasy kind of backdrop. The Iron Lords are sort of depicted as medieval archetypes in the context of Destiny. There are lords and ladies, and they rule at the top of a snowy mountain, and they use this big-ass metal axe. The tonal contrast of Rise of Iron comes from these medieval knights fighting a villain of pure science fiction. Knights versus nanomachines. Conflict believable only in the world of Destiny, and it's really fucking cool. As I said before, the campaign is short and sweet, serving really only to set up the post-campaign content. Lord Salad Bowl calls the Guardian to Fellwinter Peak to prevent the Fallen from capturing the Iron Temple. The opening mission is pretty kick-ass. We get to ride in a gondola and have this kind of on-rails shooting section. Not crazy impressive, but a really fun change of pace. On the way, we learn that Siva has brought back this fat fuck and many more horrors to come. Salamander explains what Siva is and why it's dangerous and why we haven't heard of it until now, and then sends us off to shut down the replication chamber where Siva is being made. There's a cool final battle, a big explosion, and the day is saved. And that's really all there is to the campaign. Now that no more Siva is being made, there's still the problem to deal with the existing Devil Splicers and the Siva they still have, which is where the post-campaign content comes in. There are some new missions, strikes, exotic weapons to find and all that, but easily the most impressive and best part is the raid, Wrath of the Machine. I'll talk about it a little because it's not in Destiny 2 yet, but man, there is a reason why people love it so much. You basically have to chase down an Archon priest who decided to have a bath in Siva and emerged as self-proclaimed god. The journey to shut him down takes you through not only some of the coolest locations in the series, but gives you some of the best music as well. The raid mechanics are also more complex and involved than a lot of the raids prior, and essentially set a staging ground for future raids in D2, but aren't too tricky to pull off, even when not every member of your fire team is giving 100%. There's a significant degree of spectacle to Wrath as well, like the reveal of axes during the final encounters, or watching the death Zamboni fall off the wall right after the music peaks. King's Fall did this kind of thing too, but I think the fact that this raid is set on Earth, in the Cosmodrome, grounds it a little more. It makes it more believable, a bit closer to home, and makes the spectacle just a bit more spectacular. But the best thing from Rise of Iron, despite what I just said, isn't the raid, or the weapons, or even anything original. It's a strike. A reprised strike from the vanilla campaign, the Devil's Lair. Now on the surface it seems pretty passé, just a Sieve version of the strike, big whoop. However, when you finally get to Sepic's Perfected, man, just listen. I could write several books on the music from Destiny. Like the I took too many pingers in the club vibe of the Hive and Crota. Or the subtle mystery but unfathomable danger of the Vex. The sort of quiet reverence of any track themed around the Awoken has. There are so many little themes and leitmotifs that are scattered all around the soundtracks for both games, and they give so much extra depth and meaning to not only the tracks themselves, but context for what's happening on screen. Like, fittingly, Savathun's song has wormed its way into so many Shadowkeep tracks, even the raid tracks. You know the Guardians theme as this. Basically the Destiny theme. It plays during heroic stuff or when you're at the tower. It announces the Guardians' arrival. Now, Beyond Light gave us the Pyramid/Darkness theme. Which is reused in Vow of the Disciple as the loudest fucking thing you've ever heard, where it's gradually overtaken by the Guardian theme during DPS. The main motif from Lightfall, this one, the track for Nezarec in Root of Nightmares, trails in the Darkness theme, and it's cut off by the Guardian theme, and then explodes back into Lightfall. Holy fucking shit, it is so cool. The whole series, D1 and D2, are rife with some of the best soundtracks, some of the best callbacks, structure and composition. Fuck, not even just in video games. Okay, tangent over. Where was I? Rise of Iron. Rise of Iron gives us some absolute bangers of activities. I mentioned the Devil's Lair reprise, but there's also a bunch of other strikes that got Sievified versions. There's a series of missions where you have to go and forge Gjallarhorn, which is part inside joke, part pity quest, as Gjallarhorn was so powerful in Destiny 1 that a lot of raid teams just wouldn't allow you to join if you didn't have it. You travel across the Plaguelands, up Felwinter Peak, through PvP maps, and then finally craft your Gjallarhorn, and then immediately use it to blow apart scores of Fallen. It's an awesome quest line. That and the one I mentioned earlier where you and Ghost just sit and chill for a bit after the quest for the exotic Vostov. It's tonally all-encompassing, it's comfy, it's warm, and all around a really clean way to wrap up Destiny. And so Destiny 1 sits an anomaly relative to its sequel, a time capsule emanating nostalgia on the rare occasion it's opened, locked behind the barrier of console exclusivity and a $90 paywall for the actual fun part of the game. It's a weird, familiar but different, strange ancestor to a game I've been playing for years. But would I recommend it? Fucking no. No, go play Destiny 2. All the relevant content is being ported over anyway, and you don't have to own a fucking PlayStation or an Xbox to enjoy it. If you really want to see the story and campaign, just, watch a long play on YouTube. Now, I get that it's important to remember this series' roots and acknowledge how far it's come, but come on, Destiny 2 is just so much better. I guess, if you're curious, go out and get it. I'm gonna stop you. But otherwise, that's kinda it. Peace.